Bitcoin crashed overnight, causing about $800 million worth of liquidations, mostly longs. Surprise, surprise. Now, I think it's very funny how back in April, when tariffs were basically announced, everyone was like calling for doomsday, calling that, end of the cycle, all this kind of stuff, right? And now we have this whole like Supreme Court like kind of ruling where it's going to be a bad thing if they rule not in favor of Trump and basically taking the tariffs away, which in my opinion is just like, you can't make this kind of stuff up, right? It's just like the markets are so funny. Now, obviously with the whole like EU announcements and like the new Trump announcement with like these like 10% tariffs across like various countries because he's trying to acquire Greenland, whether by like force or by like purchasing it, it's just I think it's just a lot of noise. And I've been saying this I said this like last video, and I think that structurally everything kind of looks intact. If you haven't really noticed, if you pull up like any kind of like 1 hour chart, I can't really do that right now because I'm on the road right now, as you guys can see. We basically have like this like kind of bullish structure where we kind of pump up, do like a 50% retrace, and then we kind of go up from there. Now, I've always been calling for just caution when it comes to these price action movements because, whenever we hit about $98,000, that was a very, very big area for resistance. And that's because whenever you look at higher time frames, where you look at like the 200-day moving average, the 50-day moving average, depending on different kind of time frames, there's a lot of confluence around that section. And then you obviously have a psychological level around $100,000, right? And so I wasn't ready to get bullish right there. I actually opened up a short-term short position around that area, just because I'm still very long when it comes to like my spot positions, and I always want to hedge against whatever that I'm holding, right? And so I'm not saying that we're going to go down from here a lot more. We probably could, but I think that obviously it's a very low liquidity weekend considering that it's a holiday. And I think that there's just a lot of, scared kind of people in the markets. I think that there's a lot of market makers that are trying to grab liquidity where they can. Now, obviously there's all this kind of like market structure and Clarity Act. It's all kind of being put on pause. Basically what's going on with that is the CEO of Coinbase is saying like, no, I don't want to support this anymore, basically because there's a lot of language in this basically in the bill where they don't want to give certain like yields for stable coins or through crypto, right? And obviously that would be in favor of the banks if they were to push that through, right? Because banks, they basically make their money by making people hold their money into the bank so that they can give you like 0.001% or whatever, very low yield, and so that they can lend it out and they can make more money off of your money. And so obviously that's not popular for crypto. If you're not new to crypto, you would know that you can make upwards of like 5-10% off of just staking or stable coins or any kind of stuff like that. So I understand that side of it, but I think there's going to be kind of like a middle ground, but there's just a lot of noise, right? And so I'm going to try to like wrap this up. I don't want to like keep you guys here too long, but I think that short term there's going to be a lot of turmoil because obviously the stock market's also closed. So we're going to have a lot of earnings coming up this next week. And there's just going to be a lot of like kind of news going on with this whole like acquisition of Greenland, tariffs kind of stuff. And usually what tends to happen with this is like there's this thing called taco, which is like Trump always chickens out, where basically he kind of hits the ground running. He announces like all these tariffs. They kind of negotiate over like the next week. The markets kind of like obviously sell off as soon as the announcement hits. Then they kind of go sideways, and then it kind of goes up a little bit more like a bullish momentum, and then like a week or two later we get this announcement, hey guys, we came up with a deal, and then the markets soar, right? That's usually what's been happening the whole time. That's kind of like the tariff like Trump playbook. And I don't think crypto is going to be any different. I think that this whole sell-off kind of started with obviously the futures opening, and I think that the bears are trying to make a weekly bearish structure. And obviously when things are closed, what is like the main thing you can sell? It's Bitcoin and crypto, right? Because it's 24/7 markets. Now, obviously gold and silver, rallied like crazy last night. And usually that's because of like, tensions around the world with like war tensions or just fiat systems, right? Because we have, dollar dominance, all that kind of stuff. And so there's just a lot of noise. And I think that people need to kind of have a longer time frame horizon whenever it comes to their investing strategy, because it's very easy to get chopped up in the noise, and it's really hard to buy when things don't feel so popular. And I would just ask you this like question, right? Like obviously stocks are basically at all-time highs. We have gold at all-time highs, silver at all-time highs. Do you want to buy those right now, or do you want to buy something that, obviously if you're, on this channel, you're probably pro crypto, right? And so, Bitcoin's still down about 30%, right? And it's a finite asset, and there's not going to be any more of it. obviously we're very pro, Bitcoin and crypto when it comes to this whole administration, when it comes to the United States, when it comes to basically like the world, right? I think that the writing is kind of on the wall, and I think that we all know that something is kind of going on with Bitcoin where it could be like maybe suppressed, or maybe they're helping people accumulate at lower prices. Don't really know that. Nobody's ever going to know that. But if I had suspicions, that's where I would bet. And it's just like, do you want to buy when everything's really, really high and the most popular stuff that's going up right now? Or do you want to kind of diversify or just add more to whatever your long-term convictions are, right? Because over a long time, basically over like a long time horizon, nobody really, loses money on Bitcoin, right? Like it just historically it just always makes all-time high after all-time high. I remember complaining when Bitcoin was like $8,000, $5,000, $1,000, right? And I was, buying tops then, right? And it's always like hindsight's 2020, right? And so I've noticed, and one really important lesson is like the best times that I've ever purchased was where it was just like very unpopular, where it hurt to buy it. Just because that's usually how the markets go. They trade off of your sentiment, your psychology, and all this kind of stuff. So again, just think about the long term, because I do think that we can all agree that the fiat systems are going to go to zero. I think that inflation is going to continue running hot. I think that the US economy is going to continue running hot. And so by nature, we're going to have a lot more money into the whole, money supply. And I think that, crypto is going to get a advantage when it comes to that, whenever the liquidity kind of goes back into crypto, whenever it's popular again, because it's very like narrative driven, right? It's very like attention based economy. So whenever crypto does start becoming hot again, you're going to have these Bitcoin treasury companies start accumulating a lot more. Everyone's going to start posting about it, and it's just kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So with that being said, I wouldn't worry too much about the short-term price action. I definitely would not be shorting or longing it at this point, because we're kind of in no man's land. And if you're not an experienced trader, mostly you're just going to lose all your money. And why do that? If anything, I, without giving financial advice, am going to be looking to obviously hold my low leverage shorts, but I want to also accumulate more if the prices do go lower, or just a little bit more around this area, because I think that a lot of altcoins are kind of more attractive right now in Bitcoin, in my opinion. But I've been stacking Bitcoin for years at this point. So with that being said, I hope you guys are having a great Monday, a great Martin Luther King Day. Spend time with your loved ones, go touch grass, go run, work out. See you soon. Bye.